So let's start with, what is your main motivation for running for a seat on the LCSD1 Board of Trustees?
Sure. I look at this in two ways, motivation and inspiration. Inspiration comes from my mom. She was first as an elementary school librarian, and then went on to teach 8th grade history, and actually enjoyed 8th graders, which is, I think it takes a special human to enjoy 8th graders. And throughout her career, as it kind of, she's since retired, but as it sort of tailored off, I asked her, like, Mom, how do you know you've been a successful teacher? And at that time, she'd probably taught, I don't know, somewhere 1,500, 2,000 students. It was a small town. And she's like, if I've changed a student's life for the better, I know I've been successful. And I sat there and I was like, wow, one student out of 2,000, that's pretty incredible. So that's sort of my inspiration of having some sort of purpose outside of work, and a purpose with children and in influencing their life. Motivation, I would say, kind of as I spoke, unity, there's a lot of divisiveness here. In fact, the concept of triads in and of itself is divisive, and it's just like, why is that? It's the city of Cheyenne. I've been in cities, much larger than Cheyenne, and they don't have this sort of border control thing, which is very strange. So I think unity, and not only unity with triads, but amongst just the divisiveness of seemingly on the board and in the community. I think reducing the stigma on mental health is a huge passion of mine, so I would want to do that. I also have this idea of a student board, like a student school board made up of some junior high students and some high school students from representing each of the high schools and junior highs. I think it's really important to have their voice and to have them heard in these situations, in a lot of the school board situations. Other motivations, I think, would be, this concept of being able to help produce valued and contributing people to society after graduation, whatever that path may be, and helping influence what that looks like. So inspiration to motivation.
As a quick follow-up, why did you choose to run for the Area 2 seat and not for the at-large seat? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with competition. I'm not, and I think, I have a student at East. He's a junior. I know a lot of the East faculty and parents just from going to games and things like that. Another stepson graduated from East 2 years ago, so been pretty involved with that area, and I think it just made sense, and competition.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you are elected, how would you make sure you are considering the needs of all constituents?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think I think one of the ways is through approachability. I feel like I'm pretty approachable. I want to do more things to help get the pulse of the community. I know some people are really have a adverse reaction to things like surveys, but I think they're really important. I use them in my career. I use them with my team. We use them in our company just to gauge the sort of the temperature. And I think that's a really good way to kind of just have people's voices heard. And I would love to take that information and have at least one thing that the community feels strongly about, have the board take that on and really kind of see it through. So I think that's one way to have people heard. I think also just encouraging folks. I also have this idea of a town forum called Your Voice, Our Schools. And right now it's really focused on policy. I think the unfortunate part is policy is written in legal terms and it's really hard to understand. And so the idea would be is like the first half we would pick a policy and go through it really, really well. And then the second half would be the discussion with the community, because I think if the community is more educated about the policy, they can do things to really enforce change, whatever that may be, and kind of do it without roadblocks because they'd understand. So I think it's giving them a place to be heard in those town forums, and I think surveys are another good way to kind of at least initially get that started. So, yeah, you bet.
What do you think the relationship between the board and parents should look like?
I think it should be a 50-50 relationship. And like any relationship, it's not 50-50 all of the time, although that would be great. But I think over time, maybe it's, the year your student is in, maybe it's 50-50 there. And I think it's both, it's both the teachers, principals, kind of pulling parents in, and also parents leaning in. I think if they really want to be involved, there's every opportunity for them to be involved. They just need to take that first step. Call the library, call the principal and make a meeting. Understand your kids' grades and go to parent-teacher conferences. So I think sometimes the parents have to lean in 80% and the teachers and principals are 20%, vice versa. But I think if it's an equality thing where teachers are providing space and time for parents to come in, and parents are taking advantage of that, I think that would be kind of the ideal situation for partnership there.
So you talked about the teachers and the staff involvement. If you were elected to the board, what kind of relationship would you want to have with parents, and then how does that look like for the whole board? Yeah,
that's tricky, right? Because I'm a firm believer of hierarchy, right? And there are folks that want to jump chain and go right to the board, and that's not our place, right? So I think it's in terms of the board relationship, I think it's one, making sure that's clear, right? That the accountability needs to be with the principal, then perhaps with the director of instruction, and then the superintendent, and then the board. And I'm sure they get emails all the time to do this, and I think it's just a polite please follow these steps, and then everybody underneath the principals, the director of instruction, also hold people accountable for doing that. I think it needs to be collaborative, it needs to be respectful, and I think right now I'll hit on this multiple times, I think right now there's just a lack of understanding of what actually, many times I talk about the board meeting it's not a meeting for the public, it's a governing board meeting in public. And it's a very, the public isn't necessarily the audience, it's more of the board members. And so just understanding that, understanding policy, and a collaborative one. And it can be confrontational as long as it's healthy. And it can be, I think there's a lot of things that need to talk about expectations. I think a lot of people feel if they voice their opinion, their expectation is something's going to happen, and that's not always true. So I think, collaborative, I think more approachable. I just think if the board can do a better job of marketing and helping people understand how to approach the board, it can also be collaborative.
Thank you.
I've got the next question.
Awesome.
What should the rules of engagement be at school board meetings?
Yeah. When I looked at this question, it's I kind of formed it in a way of let's look at why the rules are the way they are now. And I think that's really important. And my understanding of why you call ahead and the 3 minutes is because at one point those weren't the rules, and things became very unruly. I sat through board meetings during COVID, and so I think it's unfortunate that the rules are the way they are, but it's at a consequence of the public and the way they came about things, right? Should they be that way? Hopefully not. They shouldn't have to be that way, but they are the way they are because of, people were getting followed home. The police needed to be involved. So if we can act respectful, I think we can change the rules. But right now, I feel comfortable with them until the community can show me that, they understand how to be approachable and how to be respectful. Then we can look at changing them.
If you get to that point where you could change them, what would it look
Yeah.
like ideally?
I think I would like to go back where you don't have to sign up for comment. I like the 3 minutes because it makes you be succinct, and it does allow for multiple voices to be heard. Obviously, the same rules of you can't use foul language. You can't name people. I really like that rule. But I think having the attendants and the folks in the audience be able to speak during the meeting and sign up for that, I think that would be a good place to start.
Next question, Maurina, is do you think K-12 schools in Wyoming are adequately funded? And if not, how would you recommend the legislature address that issue?
Sure. I can't speak for all K through 12 schools in Wyoming. Obviously, here in LCSD 1, I don't feel they're adequately funded. I think I understand. I think that what the legislation and the Constitution wants to do is good intent. I mean, you know, giving every child equal learning experience to sort of Cliff Notes version. I think that's good intent. I think the way they go about it of the list, and even things like if you want to upgrade something in your building, now you move on the list. So I think I would structure it in a way where it reads that every school, beginning of the school year meets all of these requirements. Things like air conditioning, infrastructure for technology, adequate rooms for learning, and the ability to evolve and change buildings based on needs. So I wouldn't look at it as a kind of a list per se. It would just be, hey, it's July 1. Let's look at all the schools. Which ones have these? And obviously there's probably a priority within that, but I think looking at all schools adequately and making sure they can all provide the same thing at the beginning of every school year, I think is probably in my opinion, a better way to look at it.
As a board member, what would be your budget priorities for the district?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's the certified folks. It's, I think this board did a good job, a couple board meetings ago, to move the classified folks and get them in, bands and step level and schedules. I think that's fantastic. I did attend the board meeting last night and looked at the admin that Dr. Crespo had hired for the strategic plan. I, even in my own sort of just mentality on hiring, it's always, doers and people on the ground first. And I would like to go back to that. Yeah, I do believe that staff that stood up yesterday will have an impact on students, but I think it's a long-term impact, whereas we really need, near-term support in the classroom.
How do you feel about increasing teacher compensation? And if you agree salaries need to be increased, how would you find funds to do that?
Yeah, I firmly believe. I think, in fact, was it 16 or 17 years ago, Wyoming was, in the top, maybe the top paying state, if not in the top 5. And we are now, in the 40s perhaps? So I would love to get us back there. I think one of the skill sets that I do bring from just my professional life, from private industry, is this, being in startups, you have to be very creative on how you spend money. And you have to be really efficient and effective. And so bringing that kind of experience and that I think will help find funds within funds. In fact, today I had a meeting. I was like, well, let's take some money here and, and do that. And I think it's a skill set to be able to work within your means that I've done throughout my whole professional career.
Next question. How much freedom should teachers have with regard to teaching the district's curriculum? Yeah,
I think, with what I've seen and know about curriculum, they come with guidelines and tracks, so to speak, and perhaps even instructions on how to do things. And I think that's really important for first year teachers, and even I would say 1 through 4 years, so they can understand the foundation of what they're teaching, how to execute, how to implement. And I think after that, teachers should be creative, especially when they get a new class, and that way of teaching may not serve the majority of the students in that class, and they should have an ability to have some freedom and make choices on how they present that material. Now, obviously with standardized testing, there's certain things that every kid needs to know, and if those kids are below proficient, then we probably need to take another look at how creative that teacher is being. But if that teacher is able to get their students where they need to be, by all means, do what you need to do.
How do you feel about the teaching of racial discrimination as
Yeah.
part of U.S. history?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I mean, it's unfortunately it is a part of our past, and I think it's even higher above that. I think it's the role of education to provide different perspectives and talk about controversial things. In fact, in policy, it does state something like, controversial subjects shall not be avoided. Literally, I think it says that, and it may make people uncomfortable. I think as long as we can do it in a very respectful, open way and hear everybody's opinions, the factual information around racial discrimination is there. It's not a question of whether it happened or whether it still exists today. So yes, absolutely, and I think it's our role, especially as we look at going back to kind of the role of education and LCSD 1, and probably any school district, is producing well-rounded, valued, contributing members to society. Part of that is how do you treat other people and the perspective of the other people, because even if they stay in Wyoming, they're going to get that as an adult, and certainly when they venture out, they will come into contact with very different perspectives and histories.
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from the school libraries? Why?
I like to just say I support the policy that exists. I think it's all-encompassing. In fact, at the executive session, I learned a ton, which was super helpful. Everything from you can opt out an author. You can opt out a whole genre, although I wouldn't suggest that, but you can if you want to. You can curate a list of books that support your values. You can even see the books that your children are checking out. I think this is one of the topics where education and wanting to understand what the policy is. It really shows that parents have all the rights. They do. There's nothing there that I saw where you can't do that as a parent. I think what they're asking is call the librarian. That's all you. This is one of those where I think the district went 90% and the parent has to go 10. They have the technology, they have the policy, and you just need to call your librarian and they're going to work with you. And they're gonna, probably pull books in your value scheme that maybe you never thought of. So you get some perspective and a little bit more well-rounded in this. So I support the policy.
What should the process be for changing policies in the school district? And do you agree or disagree with the current process?
Yeah, it was just talked about. I was at that school board meeting until like a quarter after 11. It was really interesting because going into that meeting, I was like, why would they want to take this policy advisory committee out, right? It feels like it's a really good, and I think it was Roseanne, I can't remember who said it, but they talked about the intent of that is really good, but it really didn't facilitate what they wanted, which often, I look at intent and impact. It didn't have the impact that they wanted. Which I think was really interesting. And so they talked a lot about, like Dr. Crespo talked a lot about, I think actually the whole board talked a lot about, you're gonna need different people at different times for policy. You're gonna need experts, you're gonna need, folks that you may not think of, and holding yourself to these specific people every time, I think you don't get fresh perspectives. You're not allowed to really move within that. And so this concept of like taking that away, I was like, wow, that's actually giving you more rights. I think there's this idea of if you take things away, you're actually taking rights away. But in a lot of cases, it actually allows you to be more flexible. So I would say I would support what they're doing now, which is looking at Chapter 2, Section 11. They didn't vote on taking away the policy advisory committee, but they're really going to look at that. And I think they're moving toward a much more, I think, impactful a way, and I think a much more, I honestly, give a wide variety of perspectives.
Maurina, that's the end of our prepared questions, but I wanted to open it up and just ask you what other topics or issues you'd like to talk about that we haven't discussed so far today.
You know, let me think about that. I gotta use my time wisely. You know, something that actually came about that I plan to do a video about is, I'm gonna get emotional because it makes me sad. I actually did this in the chamber. Excuse me. Oh. This can go on TV. I'm just kidding. I read that another Air Force family pulled out because of just feeling uncomfortable with their student in school. And why I get so emotional is I'm pretty naive when it comes to humans, and I just think humans should be naturally kind, and even in the scope of children especially, because they don't learn that. That is not, or sorry, they're not born with that. That's taught. And it just really, it gets to me that they have that influence. So I think we need to talk about a disciplinary matrix around hate speech. Right now, and I want to be clear, right? Like, kids will pick on other kids, right? I'm not saying, and I think that's part of being a kid. But when it crosses the line, and now one kid is using specific words or hate speech to pick on another kid, that's where we draw the line. You can tease each other, you can call each other names, right? Like, but when you start to include verbiage that is defined as hate speech, that's where we need to draw the line, and there needs to be discipline. You know, you're not just picking on a kid now. You're not just bullying them. Your intent is to make them lesser than. And in any marginalized community, that's not fair. And hopefully when I produce my video on Facebook, I'm not crying, but I'm sure I will, because this is the second, like I addressed this at the chamber. Of course, the Air Force family hadn't left yet, but we talked about that. It's just, I talked to some students at East, and they're fabulous. They're females, and gosh, if I was ever that articulate at 17, man. And I said, you know, what interferes with your learning? And they looked at me and they said, racism and homophobia. And I was like, what? And they told me, you know, kids will stand up in class. I want to talk about abortion rights, but I can't. And you know, there's just slurs everywhere. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So disciplinary matrix on hate speech. And I probably will cry. It's just, I've learned to accept it. I get it from my mom. It's funny because I don't often cry when I'm sad, but when I get passionate and when I feel humans are just letting me down. Yeah. So I'm gonna stop there.
What other issues would you like to talk about? Anything else we didn't cover today?
I think mental health is a big one. I've struggled with my own mental health, and until recently, you know, was I had, you know, diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and I think it hit me as like, wow, there's a stigma there, and wow, I was born in, you know, Anaconda. We are blue collar, rough, tough people, and I always used to think in these black and white in terms of, well, I can't be from Anaconda and have this diagnosis. And it's like, yes, you can. And you get to choose your path of like, you're going to sit in this, I'm this stereotype and, you know, feel sorry for myself, or just be like, it's a scratch on my arm. And it's, you know, it's okay, right? In fact, one of my friends was having issues with her brother and told her brother that, hey, Maurina's doing this. He's like, I would have never guessed. And that's the whole point, right? Like, it's just there. So I think I want to help normalize talking about that. And one of the things that I do at work, which I would love to bring into high schools at first, and probably elementary schools as it comes through, is this concept of what's your heart color. And it kind of facilitates in a way, or in a way of, you can wear a shirt or a sticker, and there's different heart colors that have different meanings. So red is, I'm feeling really great today. Purple is like, I really need to reach out support. And anybody can wear them. And then it comes with like a playbook. So for example, if somebody has a purple heart, I envision this in like a high school hallway. Somebody sees that purple heart, writes their name and their cell phone, and just passes it to them. So there's no scene, so to speak. There's no, you have to talk to me now. There's no like invasion of that. It's just, here's my name, number, call me if you need me. And I think the same for people who are having a great day. Like, pass them a note. Like, what are you doing today that you can do tomorrow that can help you have a great day tomorrow? So I think to me, it's just a really non-invasive way. You don't have to approach people, but it also makes, as we're sitting in this room, everybody may have different heart colors, and you start to understand, like, wow, there's a whole different life outside of these four walls that you bring in that could have an impact, good or bad. So that would be another one. Yeah, I think that's it.
Any other